What if I told you the worst hour of your day isn't the one you're dreading? It's the one right before bed, and almost nobody is doing anything differently during it. I'm Raymond, I'm 83, and for close to a decade my nights were built entirely around a bathroom I could find in the dark with my eyes closed. These days I fall asleep and, more nights than not, I stay there until morning. And I still see my doctor every single year, still get my exam, still keep every appointment on the calendar. This isn't about avoiding your doctor. It's about what happens in the 90 minutes before your head hits the pillow, because that window matters more than almost anyone realizes. A large share of men over 50 live with some degree of an enlarged prostate. It's one of the most common conditions that comes with age, and it presses directly on the tube that carries urine, which is exactly why the bathroom becomes the center of gravity for the whole evening. What I found is one adjustment to that pre-bed window that worked more consistently than anything else I tried, and I want to walk you through exactly why. For years, my evening looked like this: dinner, then whatever I wanted to drink while we watched television, then bed. I treated the hours before sleep no differently than any other hours in the day. And then I'd lie there at 11, at midnight, at 2 in the morning, wide awake, bladder aching, doing that shuffle to the bathroom in the dark so I wouldn't wake my wife, standing there in the cold tile, willing my body to just get it over with so I could go back to sleep. Some nights it was 3 trips, some nights 4. I started keeping a mental tally, almost like keeping score in a game I was always losing. My doctor explained the mechanical piece pretty plainly. The prostate sits wrapped around that tube, and when it's enlarged, every bit of extra fluid in your system late in the day adds pressure exactly where you don't want it, right before you're trying to lie flat and relax. What she didn't have time to walk me through in an 8-minute visit was what to actually do about the timing of my day. So I went looking, and what I found reframed the entire problem for me. The issue was never how much water I was drinking overall. Staying hydrated during the day is genuinely important. Doctors are right to push that. The issue was when. I was drinking the same way at 7 at night as I was at 7 in the morning, and my body had no chance to process and clear that fluid before I asked it to lie still for 8 hours. There's something else that was working against me too, and it took longer to notice. My evenings weren't calm. I'd sit there scrolling the news, arguing with the television, carrying the whole day's tension into bed with me. And what researchers who study the stress response have documented is that chronic tension before sleep keeps a particular hormone elevated, the same hormone tied to your body's inflammation response. And that ongoing low-grade inflammation doesn't stay contained to just one system. It shows up as more pelvic pressure, more urgency, a harder time settling down at all. I was essentially winding my body up right when I needed it to wind down, and then wondering why the night felt like a battle. I want to be honest about the medication too, because that was part of my evening for a while. My doctor prescribed something to help the muscle around the gland relax, and it did take the edge off during the day, but at night, in bed, I noticed a heaviness, a kind of low fatigue that made falling asleep feel almost drugged rather than restful. And some men on that same class of medication report a drop in desire that nobody warns you about until you're already living it. I never stopped taking it without talking to my doctor first, and I want to be very clear about that, because stopping medication on your own is not what I'm suggesting to anyone. What I did do was ask her directly whether there was anything I could layer in around it on my own time that might ease the load rather than replace what she'd prescribed. That question is what sent me looking at the evening itself instead of just the pill bottle. So here's the real question, the one that actually changes the outcome. What do you do with those 90 minutes instead? For years, one number ran my life, the PSA. It would tick up a point and I'd lie awake the whole night certain it meant the worst, picturing the biopsy, the knife, the end of everything. Then someone finally told me the truth no doctor had. That number doesn't measure cancer, it measures your prostate. And as we age, it climbs mostly because the gland is simply enlarging, benign, swollen, and uncomfortable, not the worst. The number was scaring me half to death over something ordinary. And the prescriptions they push to shrink it? They can flatten your drive completely, soften everything, quietly take the man right out of you. I wasn't willing to trade that away. There's a gentle way to support that gland, keep it comfortable, a healthy size, without surrendering any of that. Keep getting checked every year, of course. At 83, that number doesn't own me anymore. I finally have peace. Let me show you what gave it to me in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. Here's the trick, and it's genuinely one adjustment, done the same way every single night. Starting about 90 minutes before bed, I stop drinking anything except small sips if I truly need them. Not because fluids are bad, because I front-load my hydration into the morning and afternoon instead, so my body isn't caught trying to process a fresh glass of water right as I'm trying to fall asleep. That alone cut 1, sometimes 2 trips out of my night within the first couple of weeks. But the water timing was only the first piece. Alongside it, I started taking a small amount of magnesium in the evening, the kind found naturally in leafy greens and nuts, which I wasn't eating enough of. Magnesium is well understood to support normal muscle relaxation throughout the body, and a pelvis that's tense and clenched all evening doesn't settle the same way one that's genuinely relaxed does. The third piece was the stress piece. I gave myself 15 quiet minutes before bed with the television off, sometimes just sitting, sometimes reading something that had nothing to do with the news. It sounds almost too simple to matter. It mattered more than the water timing did, if I'm honest. I also cut back specifically on caffeine after the early afternoon, since a large study looking at men across the country found that higher caffeine intake tracked with more urinary symptoms and a higher likelihood of an enlarged prostate. And I made sure the little I did drink in the evening wasn't alcohol. That one is worth saying plainly, because a nightcap feels relaxing in the moment, but alcohol adds to the same inflammatory load we're trying to calm down, and it acts on the bladder in a way that works directly against everything else in this system. 4 small things, stacked together, done every single night without exception. Front-load your fluids earlier in the day, a small amount of magnesium in the evening, 15 quiet minutes to let your nervous system actually stand down before you lie flat, and easing off caffeine and alcohol as the day winds toward evening. None of it dramatic. None of it a pill that promises to shrink anything overnight. Just your evening, engineered on purpose instead of left on autopilot. I'll add one more piece because someone always asks about it in the comments. Elevating my legs for about 15 minutes in the late afternoon, feet up on a couple of pillows on the couch. It sounds unrelated to the bladder entirely, but fluid that pools in your lower legs during the day has to go somewhere once you lie flat at night. And for a lot of men, it redistributes straight into the bladder in the middle of the night as extra urgency. A small study looking at men who wore knee-high compression during the day found it improved venous return and reduced that overnight redistribution meaningfully. I started doing the leg elevation version instead of compression socks, honestly because I found the socks uncomfortable, and it still made a noticeable difference alongside everything else. I still travel with my wife now, without mapping out every rest stop along the highway first. We took a trip to see our granddaughter last spring, and I slept the whole way there in the passenger seat, which hadn't happened in years. I still keep my yearly exam right on schedule. No matter how good I'm feeling, that part never changes. I think of a man named Nolan, 72, spent 40 years driving long-haul routes out of Amarillo before he retired, who told me he'd resigned himself to waking up 4 times a night and just accepted it as the price of getting old. He was skeptical the timing of his evening could matter as much as I was telling him it did. He tried it anyway, the earlier fluids, the magnesium, cutting the evening beer he'd had every night for decades. Within 3 weeks, he was down to 1 wake-up most nights, occasionally none. He still keeps his annual checkup. He just stopped treating his nights like something he had no say in. He told me the hardest part wasn't the routine itself. It was believing, after 4 decades of the same pattern, that something so ordinary could actually move the needle. It took him about 3 weeks of doing it every night, no exceptions, before he trusted it enough to stop counting his wake-ups out loud to his wife every morning. What I want you to walk away with is this. You have far more control over that 90-minute window than you've ever been told. Here's what I settled on, a few drops a day. And let me tell you why it works. One compound calms one signal, but a swollen prostate answers when several are calmed at once. The growth signal, the inflammation, the pressure inside it. So what I use concentrates them, working as one, the way the research actually uses them, not a single ingredient pretending to be enough. A gland that stays comfortable and a healthy size, fewer trips, and the quiet of no longer fearing that number. It leaves the man fully intact. None of that flattening the prescriptions can do. It's linked right under this video. Go look for yourself. It won't replace your doctor or your yearly check. It supports the biology right alongside them. I'm 83, and that number doesn't own me anymore. I think about all those years I spent treating my evenings as something that just happened to me, the same way weather happens to you. And I think about how different it feels now, 83 years old, knowing that the hour before bed is actually mine to shape. That's not a small thing at this age. That's the difference between dreading the night and simply living through it like anyone else does, lying down, closing your eyes, and trusting your body to let you rest. I'm not telling you this fixes everything the moment you try it. I'm telling you it's worth 90 minutes of your evening to find out. This isn't complicated, and it isn't expensive, and that's exactly why it gets overlooked. We spend money chasing solutions and skip right past the 90 minutes that were sitting there in front of us the whole time, free, waiting to be used differently. So tell me in the comments, what does your nightly routine actually look like right now? And has anyone ever asked you that question before? I read every single one, and if tonight is the night you finally try rearranging those last 90 minutes, subscribe, because I've got more of what worked for me, and I want you to see it. Keep getting checked every year, keep your doctor in the loop about anything that changes, and don't let another night convince you that this is simply what old age has to feel like.